for meeting with me. So
Thank
again,
you, Kel.
so I just super casual. Why don't you tell me a little bit about, yeah, your background and the process that you go, and then we can start to get into the process that you go through to make these really wonderful, whimsical pieces we have in the gallery.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, uh, People ask me how I got started carving, and I always tell them the Pinewood Derby back in Cub Scouts about 60 some years ago, I think. But since then, I carved a little bit later on, maybe during my college days. And then I more steadily picked it up, 15 years ago or so, and have been carving ever since, which keeps me busy and I enjoy it. I carve generally with what's called green wood, which it's
Mm.
not kiln dried or anything. I do use some kiln dried, but and I prefer not to use any live trees.
Mhm.
So I've got a kind of a backyard full of logs, so that keeps me busy. And then I use quite a number of tools, and they're all specific to certain types of cuts that I want to make. And uh, other than that, I get my inspirations a lot of times from the wood itself. I'll look at the piece of wood, and I may even have it hanging around in the shed for a while, and finally I'll see what's in there and just start whittling away at that point. And I use pretty much all hand tools, some Dremel and a high powered machine called a Fordham with bits that really take off a lot of wood in a hurry that I probably wouldn't otherwise use and
Mm.
in that particular piece. So then from there, I get out, remove what I don't want, and then start carving more details
Mm.
within the carving itself, and pretty much go from there.
Wow. So what gave you like the idea to go in the direction of like, I guess this Celtic direction, but also like wood spirits and this sort of like there's like a fantasy element to your work, right?
It might have been from some of the initial wood carving shows that I attended.
Mm.
My first one was, like I say, about 15 years ago, and I joined the club almost right after that. But there was a number of guys that did those types of carvings, and I thought they were pretty neat. And plus, more of the realistic ones, mug shots or sculptures of faces, things like that. But yeah, the cottonwood bark that I use, a lot of it is. It offers a lot of different nooks and crannies to turn into whatever, and I like to use part of the bark
Mm.
on those pieces, so it just brings out a little bit more character and
Sure.
and you know
Yeah. So like, so you're, it's sort of like just coming from the wood. It just reminds me of like that really old adage that the artist sees the work in the marble, right? Before it
yeah,
like
yeah, right.
it doesn't feel like that old sort of master narrative.
Yeah,
You have to,
it it does maybe more so with the busts and things that I do,
mm,
because I'll in my birdhouses I'll try to incorporate like knots
sure.
in the birdhouses. I'll use generally white cedar, and
Mhm.
there's always knots in the woods. So I'll try to turn them into a perch for the birds, maybe a cigar or a pipe or something. There's not many, yeah, yeah. There's not many knots in the cottonwood. So there again, like I take care, use the little nooks and crannies, the splits in the wood, different things like that. But I do like to use maybe a harder wood. I like butternut a lot, which I like those woods because they've got a nice wood grain. I
Mm.
rarely paint any of my pieces. I will varnish and put an oil or wax and polyurethane type things on them. But I do like to see the wood grain coming
Yeah.
out of that wood, and sometimes they turn out really beautiful. And that's why I guess I use the wood grain.
Yeah. I love the pieces with the bark that are coming, especially through and how that's incorporated. And it is like, and I know that this was mentioned at the opening as well in the gallery, but how thick that bark and actually how much
Yeah,
life you can get out of that bark
yeah,
is so interesting. And that's is that the cottonwood? Is that what that bark is?
Yeah, well, yes, it's the bark right on the cottonwood tree. My mother lives on the Mississippi River and over by south of La Crosse. And so I found an old dead cottonwood tree down in the bottomlands, and I think I pretty much stripped it's an eastern cottonwood, so the bark doesn't get as thick
Yeah.
as I guess the western cottonwood,
Mm,
which I picked up a bunch of that stuff. I helped my daughter and son-in-law move some of their stuff back from LA,
mm.
about a year ago. And so I stopped along the Platte River on the way back and found a few dead trees, and the bark's probably twice as thick and more dense than the eastern cottonwood. So I've done a few pieces with that, and we'll probably be doing a few more.
Yeah. It's just so interesting because they're also so light. They have like such body to them, but like they're so light on the wall and in your hand. And I don't know. It's just
Yeah.
they're really cool. And it's just the amount of detail that you can get is just so surprising. And like we usually just think of bark as like these flimsy, like chipping away
Right.
from the tree,
Right.
and
Yeah.
so to
Yeah.
see it like that sort of have that much body is so interesting.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
super resourceful. So you mentioned that you use mostly already dead or found wood.
Right. Right.
And you mentioned greenwood. What is
Well,
green?
that's what I guess like a storm damaged tree or something like that before it dries out.
Sure.
It's called a greenwood, and I can seal it if I do it, relatively soon. I'll give it a coat of paint on the top and bottom of the cut, so
Sure.
it doesn't absorb as much moisture. So when I actually do start carving on that particular piece of wood, I need to get it done in a relative short amount of time, or at least I try to keep it wet or damp during the process,
Oh,
so it doesn't split. If
sure.
it if it does, I'll maybe use portions of that the discarded wood from that piece to fix splits, different things like that.
Hmm.
So it kind of blends into one piece.
Okay. I guess I have another question about the wood spirits and the whimsies.
Uh-huh.
Are they related? Like, or are these like two different worlds? The sort of like green man, or are they intertwined in your brain somehow?
Yeah, yeah. I think the green man is kind of close to that wood spirit. They say wood spirits give you good luck. Those
Sure.
guys, I just, they'd be close to a green man, I guess, but I don't know that I associate them with either the whimsies, but I guess you could figure some of those guys live in those little whimsy towers that I do create. So,
Yeah. Like little
but
tiny.
those again, yeah, yeah, when with the wood spirits, I try to create the face as close to like a natural face as I can.
Mhm.
I'll put some distortions in there once in a while. I try to get the eyes always is about as lifelike as I can make them, which I know I've seen a lot of work from others that, a lot of them paint their eyes and things like that. I just don't
Oh,
do that.
yeah. No, there's absolutely no paint on these, but they really do they have so much life in them without the paint. It's just, which is really
Uh-huh.
interesting. And the
Yeah.
the whimsies, those structures, the houses, I mean, they have, I think leaving the bark on there too, like kind of gives you this illusion of
Yeah.
landscape, creates a
Yeah.
landscape. Which again is just, I think is really amazing. And that just this like tiny, teeny tiny area, you get this whole little environment. Um, yeah. So how do the smaller bits, like the burls and the wands and the feathers and all, how did you come to all?
Those, well, there again, a lot of those comes from pieces I've split off from larger pieces that I've done. I built a shaving horse quite a number of years ago, so I've got the draw knives. So I'll take them down and kind of narrow it down to the shape I want, and I might use a bandsaw or a jigsaw to cut out, for like feathers, that particular shape,
Oh, sure.
and then work with whatever I have there.
Oh, sure.
Um, Feathers, I enjoy doing those. I try to make little, the way the little fern, whatever part of the feather is that curl up or feather. I like to do that and try to include some of that in the wands, whatever turns up, I guess. Sometimes I'll use a little, the glowing, can't think of the word right now, the sprinkles that give it some,
Oh, a little
glitter.
glitter.
Glitter, there you go. I'll throw some glitter on a couple of, you got to have that magic powder on them. So
Totally.
I tell kids, I tell those that buy those too, is watch where you're pointing them and what you say when you're pointing them, because
Never
poof.
know. I
Yeah,
mean, they've
yeah.
already kind of got, they're already charged with the Jim Lynes energy. So, gotta watch out where they're getting pointed and what you're saying. Um,
Uh-huh.
so
Uh-huh.
is this about the things that we have in the gallery? I guess the heads are about the size of the human head, maybe a little smaller.
Mhm.
Do you
Mhm.
ever, and a lot of the other things are kind of small on the smaller scale. Do you ever work really big,
Mhm.
or do you kind of just prefer that small scale?
Yeah, I've done a few large pieces. I've got a pair of trolls up in Door County.
Yeah.
My daughter worked up there for a summer, and there's a place in Egg Harbor called the Bridge.
Okay.
And I just walked in there for a cup of coffee or something one day, and I said, this is what I do. And she asked if I did trolls, and I'm thinking, a little 2-foot troll that sit on the railing of the bridge. But no, she wanted whatever life-size trolls they were. But they ended up being, I suppose, 5, 6 feet tall.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Other pieces I've done some fireplace mantles. I think the largest one I've done is like a 12 foot by about 12 inch and about 18 inches deep. And that took me, probably 700, maybe 1,000 hours. It's of, some of the people there in Prairie du Sac area, Lavelle, Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the main part, circa about 1880 or 90. I used all the old pictures I could find. And then the client's current house, cottage, if you want to call it a cottage, I guess. He had like 3 fireplaces in the place. And then, the Douglas Farm. It was the farm where Lake Redstone was built on. So that there again, it was circa about 1880 or 90.
Wow.
And those were the three scenes on the one fireplace. Then another fireplace he had downstairs was, a lot of it having to do with winter activities here in Wisconsin and Wisconsin Dells area with water slides and things like that. So
Wow. That's really cool. And is that was all that out of found wood too, the way that you prefer to work, or did they supply you?
um, the fireplaces, these were existing already installed in the house he bought. So I did that right on site. The trolls, I picked up a couple of white pine logs and carved them out of that. And this again was mostly hand tools. I think I chainsawed a little bit of it, but most of it hand tools. I've done some, the birds might be not quite life size, but about the size of probably some of the busts that I've done.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Yeah, it seems like you're
People will,
multi-talented, Jim.
people will ask me, hey, I've got an old tree dead in the yard and they'll want me to come and do something. I've done a couple of them, but there again, it's travel time and this and that, and gets to be more of a, I don't know if you'd call it a headache, but
A lot of work.
something I'd stay or I'd rather do it in my shop, I guess.
Sure, that's understandable. Is there anything else you would like the public to know about your artwork that's here or otherwise, Jim?
Um, I know people have asked me about shows that I do, and I've done some, I guess, relatively major shows. I've done the Off the Square in Madison for a few years, and several. They're always juried shows, so you've got to, send your 3 or 4 pieces in to be juried in.
Mhm.
But my wife and daughter and son have told me I'm starting to get. It's a little bit too much work for an old guy anymore. So now I'm limited it to galleries like yours
Yeah, well,
that
we're
display my.
we're thrilled to have you. So
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. I want to thank you and Lindsay and the entire board for inviting me to display my work there.
Yeah, well, we are thrilled to have it, and it's flying off the walls right now. So
Great.
so yeah. So thanks so much for talking with me, and I don't know. I hope that I get to see you soon, and that your travel plans go really well.
Well, I'm heading out of town for a week and a half or so, but when I get back, I'm going to start in on a bunch of whimsies and maybe some other pieces that I can drop off the gallery.
Great. That would be great because it's up till October, so we gotta make sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Gotta make sure we still have your pieces here. So,
Great.
all right. Well, thanks so much, Jim.
Thank you, Kel, and you have a good day.
You too.
My name is Mike Murray. I am a outdoor photographer. And as like Jim said, I'd like to thank the gallery, Kel, and I've been a member of this gallery for I don't know how many years now, and I'm so proud to be part of this family here. And so yeah, thank you for hosting this and allowing us to show some of our work here. So, my story. I grew up in Key West, Florida. Early 60s. Came to Madison. My mom was born up here, so came up here, but never lost that beach vibe kind of thing. It's like that's kind of my deal. So photography. I started, do you guys remember the little pocket Instamatic cameras? Well, I was on a road trip in 1979 with a group of guys, and we were driving from Madison to LA. And we stopped in Colorado for a couple weeks. And so I had this little pocket Instamatic camera, and I started going up into the Rocky Mountain National Park. And I started to be able to, I was seeing things that others weren't. I was seeing really good compositions, and so I started taking pictures with this camera, and I just kind of fell in love with photography. I didn't get a real camera until about 1985, and then I had 3 boys, and it was sports. And when the last one left in 2008, I decided to just go all in, buy new equipment, and start my journey into doing more of the landscape stuff. Currently I do about 10 or 11 art shows a year. Plus I teach photo workshops, Oregon coast, Tennessee, Lake Superior, Michigan, Minnesota, Wisconsin, South Dakota, and I just booked a trip to go out to the Death Valley in November to set up a workshop for next year. As you can see by my work, I like drama, and I like calmness and peacefulness. And I also, if you look at my work, I like to set up compositions in a way that makes you feel like you're right there. So when I'm setting up a composition and I'm looking at the angles and I want to make you feel like you're right in that, like you can walk into that picture. So, like I said, I've been doing this professionally since about 2008, 2009. I started doing a lot of landscape work, and one day my wife said, you know, you ought to try to sell this stuff. And I thought, oh, there's no way. Nobody's ever going to buy one of these pictures. And 12 years later, I'm amazed at how many pictures I've sold. It's shocking to me, and I'm so appreciative of the people who buy my work and who find it interesting. The type of photographer I am, I'm a little bit of a, no, I'm a lot of a risk taker. I get into situations that I probably shouldn't, but I'm always going for those shots that are hard to get. I've had a number of accidents, nothing that's been really bad, but I have been wiped out by waves out on the West Coast. I've fallen down waterfalls. I have lost equipment. In fact, last week I was over by Loganville hiking through the woods, and I went down to a waterfall, and I fell down twice. I hit my head and bloodied my arm, but man, did I get some great shots. So it is worth it. And as I get older, I tend to curb that a little more. But when I go out to shoot, I don't have anything specific in mind. I do a lot of driving. I probably put on about 2,700 to 3,000 miles a month. And I go out looking for stuff that's interesting. And sometimes when I plan to go somewhere, I'll end up somewhere else. So I'm drawn to, like I said earlier, I'm drawn to the water. There's something about water, rock, beaches. I love shooting that stuff, but I also like shooting old barns and, you know, stuff that's kind of vintage looking. Traveling, go to the Caribbean every year, go to Costa Rica every year. I do 2 or 3 trips, usually out west, every year, just looking for interesting images. And some of them are really, really nice. And I mean, I look at them and go, God, these are great shots. But when I bring them back and I try to sell them in Wisconsin, they want local. Everybody wants local. So, but I do it for myself because I love to travel and I love to go to you know, different locations and different spots that many people don't have an opportunity to go to. So I kind of feel like it's something that I can do for people is create images that allow people who don't get to go to the Oregon coast, don't get to go to Death Valley, don't get to go to the Badlands, you know, to see what they look like and see how beautiful they are. Trying to think, are there any questions you guys have?
Where's that picture taken of the ocean?
That is in Lake Superior. And that was taken up about 30 miles from the Canadian border. This was in California near Bishop, up in the Bristlecone Mountains, or Bristlecone Pines. And these are all local. This was in Sheboygan, Spooner, and Webster, which is in northwestern part of the state. And I have a cabin northwest of Spooner, so I spend a lot of time up there and then shooting around the Lake Superior area.
Have you been to Death Valley yet?
No.
Last year, a friend of my son's, and I don't know what he took the pictures with, but sent some pictures from Death Valley that were phenomenal.
That's why I'm going. I shoot with Sony equipment. I used to be a Canon guy, but I converted over to Sony 3 years ago. Why? I went out, before I started doing workshops, I went out to California and attended a workshop with the intent of watching the person do this workshop for a week. How their days went, how they handled people, how they helped people. And he is a Sony artisan. He is one of the top photographers, Sony photographers in the United States. And so conversing with him over the years, he kind of converted me over to Sony. And so I'm shooting with a 61 megapixel camera, which is a lot of megapixels for a camera, but it allows me to do large shots. In fact, last fall I had some commission work from somebody in Waupun, who owns a big piece of property, and they wanted me to come out and shoot during the fall. And so I went out, spent a couple days shooting out there. They ended up putting, I think it was 4 8-foot by 4-foot pieces in their house. To do something that big, I got to have a lot of megapixels. So that's why, you know, I went to Sony, because they have probably the largest format cameras for digital that are out here. Yeah.
Do you outsource your processing then, or do you have the facilities to do it too?
All of my prints that you see at shows, the matted prints, I print all those. I put all those together. When I'm doing larger pieces like this, there's a company in Chicago that I work with, and I outsource with them.
This old rotted tree there, or whatever it is, what's the story behind that and the light behind it?
This is a bristlecone pine, and these trees are anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 years old. And this was in the White Mountains, and we hiked up there. It was probably, I think it was like 9,000 feet. I mean, it was quite a hike. Went up in the early evening, got up to our spot, and we're shooting probably around 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock. So you've got the night sky, you've got the Milky Way, but then you have some of that light pollution coming off the town below. And that's what lit up the clouds. So,
That's phenomenal.
thank you.
What's stake? As a photographer, how much liberty do you take, or what's your goal in, like the sunset ones here, trying to capture the sunset as it is and not punching up any color?
I use filters. I use a lot of filters. So I'll use graduated filters. And what those are is that it's a filter. It's a large filter that has a darker top and a lighter bottom, and it lets you balance the light. Because a lot of times you'll go out with a camera and you'll see somebody take this picture of this bright sunset, and the ground will be pitch black. Or the ground is you can see the ground and then the sunset is blown out. With the filters, it allows you to balance that light, and it also enhances the skies. So I use a lot of graduated filters. I use the gradient filters. I use the neutral density filters, which allows me to shoot longer shutter speed. So for like this one, that's probably a 25-second exposure.
These all attached to the camera?
They do attach to the camera, but there's times when I get tired of attaching them and I just hold my hand and yeah. So
Is graduated and gradient the same thing?
yes,
Okay.
it is.
So that you have a graduated and a filter on it and a 25.
Yes, yep. And that was at sunset. And I think the winds were a good 20, 25 miles an hour, but nice clouds. And I just set up and put the gradient on there and the ND filter, which allowed me to balance the light and shoot the long exposure.
With your star shot there, are you planning on the Perseid meteor shower here in a couple days?
No, it all depends on where I'm at. If I'm up at my cabin, like I was up there I think I was up there during a weekend in May, and the Northern Lights popped up, and I got some just beautiful Northern Light shots. But those, now, you see all these images of the Northern Lights, but what you see on film or in the picture is not what your eye is seeing. Just like with this, some people have come in and said, "Oh, did you paint those stars in? Because I don't see that many stars." Well, when you open your exposure for 20, 30, 40 seconds, all the light that your eye can't see comes into that camera. Same with the Northern Lights. You're shooting, when the night I was out on my pier and I was looking at, and I could just see this dull green shimmer. And it didn't look like anything great, but I took like a 25, 30-second exposure, and I got these beautiful greens and these reds and these yellows, and you can't see that with the eye, but the camera picks it up.
I heard that in Iceland. Movement in the Northern Lights?
Yeah. 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 So I do like to do night sky shooting. That's one of the things we'll be doing when we go out to Death Valley, is doing a lot of night sky stuff. Yes?
Do you ever do the moon?
You know, the moon is difficult to do because it's so bright that if you try to take a picture of it like late in the evening, you know, big full moon, you're going to get a picture of this big white moon and nothing, everything else is going to be black. So if you're going to do moon shots, you almost got to do it as it's beginning to rise above the horizon earlier in the evening. You can get, I have done some really pretty moon shots where, you know, the sky's going to be black, and if you set your exposure, you know, to pick up the light on the moon, you're going to get a really nice shot. You're going to be able to see, you know, the landscapes of the moon. And so, but people run out, you know, grab their picture, and they take this picture of the moon, and they come back and they look at it and go, oh, this is horrible. It's because it's so bright, you have to expose for that brightness.
So a filter won't help that?
No, it's just too bright. So, yeah, Jim.
So the digital cameras, you mentioned Sony, just Hasselblad, or, you know,
Yeah, most of them have gone digital. I stopped shooting, like I said, I stopped shooting film in '08. I still have a number of my film cameras, and but I don't. It's too easy to shoot digital and review it right away, and delete it if you don't like it. Whereas you remember in the old days, you'd bring home that roll of 36 and you'd get 2 good ones, and you'd go, oh crap. So yeah, it's much easier. So I don't have a lot of equipment. I have a 14 to 24 millimeter lens for my wide angles. I have a 24 to 70 for, you know, medium focal length, and a 70 to 200. And because I'm usually only doing landscapes, that's really all I need. So I don't have a ton of equipment. There is a ton of it sitting in the closet not being used, but I don't carry that stuff anymore. So
One camera?
one camera. I used to carry 2 bodies, and I wanted this other lens, and so I sold the other body to buy the other lens. So, yeah. Yes?
Where's the start with the tree taking?
In Bishop, California, which is in the Sierra Nevada mountains. Anything else? Yes?
I just have a question about, to me, one of the most beautiful times, whatever, is winter skies. And it might be similar to what you said about the
Mhm.
moon, but the stars are so bright sometimes, and almost midnight in the sky. And sometimes you see all this, maybe a moon is out there someplace, but can you film, or can you take pictures of that? That kind of or is that still too dark, like a?
No, you know, if what I would suggest for that time is that, yeah, you know, wait for a full moon and let it light up the landscape, the winter landscape. Don't take a picture of the moon. Just use that moonlight as your light source. And yes, you can take beautiful pictures that way.
Sounds like I've never seen it.
Yeah,
Pictures like that.
yeah.
What else do you have there?
This is it. I do 10 or 11 art shows a year. In fact, I have one tomorrow in Green Lake. But other than that, I do sell online. I sell at the gallery. And the cow chip, yeah. And I do the workshops. And those are usually 4 to 5 days, and they're out in the field, and they're not intense, but there are times where we have to like tell people that they can't go that way because it's dangerous and stay with us. And but they're fun. We have a lot of fun. We have there's 2 other photographers, Dave Meese, who used to live in Oregon, now he lives up in Lac de Flambeau, and Cassius Callender, who's a local photographer out of Stoughton. And so we partnered up and created 4 Elements Photo Adventures, and that's what we do. Anything else? No?
Do you have to bring a camera to go on one of those?
Yes, you need to bring a camera. We were out in the Badlands in June, and one of the people that came out brought their granddaughter, and she was, I don't know, maybe 20, and she brought a camera, but spent most of the time shooting with her phone. And as hard as we tried to get her to shoot with the camera, it's just, for that age, it's just phone. So, yeah. So thank you guys for coming out. Appreciate it.